Good morning, West Ham fans. Now, after the game on Sunday, we won. Still, like, my head's still a bit fuzzy. Having waited, was it 8 months or something like that since our last home win? It actually marked an interesting point in the fact is. Being our 10th game in the Premier League, we have now had 5 games. We had 5 games under Graham Potter and 5 games after Nuno Espirito Santo. So I thought, myself and Ben, our analyst, thought let's look at side-by-side comparisons. And obviously, we're not taking into account Potter's time previously last year. We're just looking at this season and looking at the differences that we're already seeing 5 games into the Nuno-lution, as someone called it. I think it was on the Athletic. I think it was Rashane called it the notion. He's still Super Nez to me. Right, let's firstly move the logo. Let's move the logo over there, son. Get over there. That's it. Thank you. And let's have a look at the stats. So what we're looking at the moment is everything in the first column. That is what we're up to after 10 games. And then obviously we've got Potter versus Nuno with differences. So possession, we're seeing a slight increase under Nuno Espirito Santo from 41% under Potter to almost 46% now. So that is almost a 10. Well, it says it's 4.4, but wave on wave, so to speak, you're looking at about a 10% from Potter to Nuno's swing. Passes, we're not looking at as many passes, so we're seeing more possession but less passes. So there we go. One would assume maybe more holding on to the ball, more dribbling with the ball potentially as well. Pass completion, we're seeing a lot more. Well, it's about the same, but a couple of percent increase from Nuno to Potter. Shots, we're seeing a couple more shots. We're seeing more shots on target. We're seeing more crosses. Now, that's quite an interesting thing. From going to 84 to 94, divided by 5, that's a good couple each game. We're seeing increased crossing. And actually, if we looked at the stats, we can see there's a lot more influence down the left-hand side, particularly with, obviously, Diouf and his crossing. But obviously, looking at the game on Saturday, Sunday rather, obviously the second goal was as and Wan-Bissaka cross into the mixer, with Sven Botman turning it into their own his own net. And cross completion, a slight increase. So there's a few interesting things there. More possession, not as many passes, but a higher pass completion rate anyway, slightly more, but a lot more crosses. So again, expecting what we're, so it's more direct. It's more direct, as we would have assumed. Less passing, less shitting around at the back and all that crap. But they sort of pass it. It's a lot more about getting the ball out wide and crossing it in. Quite a simple style and pragmatic style of football, as we know, but it's the way that Nuno plays. And actually, I think the most of us were probably more entertained in that Newcastle game than we had been for the previous 9 games added together. Looking more specifically at sort of XG and stuff like that. Again, on the left-hand side, we've got the total, and then we've got how it's broken down by Potter and Nuno. So we can see a much increased XG, expected goals under Nuno. And again, that might be a factor of more direct, more progressive passes in terms of more crosses into the box. So it's gone up 2, almost over 2, so 50% increase on Potter, which is quite staggering. But interestingly, the expected goals against has increased as well. So goals all round. It does seem goals all round, but definitely an increase in that. Tackles is a really interesting one. It's gone from 59% to 65%. So that's an increase of, wave on wave, a 10% increase or 6% in real terms. And I think particularly looking at that Newcastle game, there was a lot more aggression in that midfield than we've seen. Again, probably for the first 9 games. How many times the likes of Freddie Potts win balls by tackling in the midfield, by being aggressive? Fernandes being aggressive. Goals conceded, obviously half as many goals conceded under Nuno and under Potter, which again is startling. It's a 50% decrease in goals conceded, which is exactly what we want. Conceded from set plays, roughly the same. So when we do concede under Nuno, it has still been that Achilles heel, which has been the set plays, but we're less likely to be conceding goals in open play as well, which is a start. And goals scored about the same. But you can see here clearly we scored about the same. We scored the same amount of goals, but we're conceding less, and that's the main thing. And we're being combative in the midfield, and we're actually winning tackles. Aerial success rate, that's increased as well. It's increased by 7.6% from Potter to Nuno, which is an increase of about 7%. 7, 14, 21. Was that by about 15%? If I'm just making that up. 10% would be 9. Yeah. About 15% off the top of my head. About 15% increase in aerial success rate. And I think particularly now in the Premier League, which does seem to have a bit more of a physical nature to it now, with, things like set plays for long throws and a real emphasis on, set pieces and stuff. Having the aerial success rate increase is critical. So the pointers are looking good, and actually, as everyone's been saying, if we we need to get a result out of the Burnley game in order to capitalise on this sort of this new wave of optimism we're seeing, and the stats are there to sort of back it up. Really, there's a couple of things which sort of it's not perfect. We know it's not perfect, but what we're seeing are green shoots. Definitely seeing green shoots, and one swallow doesn't make a summer. What is the expression? I always say it: swallow make a summer. One swallow doesn't make a summer. That's what I mean. One swallow. It is one game, but I think everyone can agree we saw more in that one game than we did probably for all 9 games added together previously, in terms of aggression, in terms of things we can take away and be positive of. You've got to think, tick, academy and inclusion. Freddie Potts, yes. The midfield, Fernandes and Potts as a 2, very much. And throwing Paqueta into that mix, but playing Paqueta as a 10. As a 10, as Nuno says, the 10, the position, the 10. Seeing the likes of Fernandes and Potts together gives you energy, gives you dynamism. Certainly more dynamic, more energetic, more youthful than we had under Potter with the likes of Souček and James Ward-Prowse. It's night and day. It's night and day in terms of the ability. Plus, factoring in a Magassa in there as well, potentially, to cover, a Potts injury. Or, for me, I think the side that started on Sunday should be our starting 11 now, bar any injuries, at least until January, when things can be reassessed. We've seen, I thought defensively we look better than we have done for a lot of time, and not perfect at all, long way to go, but there are green shoots there. And when you look at some of those stats, I'll bring them in again. When you look at some of those stats, such as tackles, aerial success rate, that's how we're going to drag ourselves out of this problem. And with that, with the progressive passes, with less passing but more more XG, it's showing that we're being more what's the word? We're being more direct with the way we're playing, which we know is Nuno sort of preferred style. But I wouldn't say, in all honesty, our performance against Newcastle, we played direct as such. I mean, there was balls banged up and, to the likes of Wilson and to the likes of Souček, but we played it out wide. We overlapped. For being a pragmatic footballer, I don't think football manager, I don't think it was particularly boring as such. And if that continues, then sign me up for that. I'm more than happy with that. But anyway, what do you think? Obviously, those are the stats. And stats can obviously paint pictures based on how you want to interpret the stats. But for me, they look good, and they're a start. They're a start, and I think particularly with the likes of. Particularly the likes of Magassa, we've got Fulcrew potentially being there. You've got Mavropanos coming back from injury. I genuinely think we're starting to see these green shoots, and we're starting to see something which we can associate ourselves with. And having Freddie Potts in that middle gives us that West Hamness. And you're looking at, last night you had the under-21s play, quite an unusual under-21 side. A lot of players were not in the squad, the likes of Kante, the likes of Golombekis, Ezra Mayes. A number of them, I think, are probably training with the first team this week, and then based on whether they are needed, they will then play on Friday. On Friday, the academy plays Liverpool at Rush Green at 7:00. So get along to that if you can. And yeah, if it weren't for a Marshall missed penalty, we would have won that game. Actually, had a couple of chances right at the end as well, didn't he, Marshall, to be honest. But hey ho, they got a draw. Another undefeated match to add to them. But yeah, again, reasons to be cheerful. But anyway, what do you think about the first 5 games under Nuno compared to the first 5 games under Potter this season? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, share. If you've got a spare hype, give it a hype. And we'll talk to you later. Peace out, mofos. Bye. Bye.